Welcome back to The Explainer. So today we're undertaking a deeply important, frankly chilling journey. We're going to trace a timeline that almost defies comprehension. We'll look at how the personal resentment of a single, failed artist morphed into a highly organized, state-sponsored genocide. Let's map out exactly how this happened, step by dark step, so we can truly understand the mechanics of how hatred takes root.
How far can the hatred of a single man actually go? It's a question that just haunts history. Can a twisted personal idea turn into state policy and drag an entire continent into the absolute abyss? What we're about to explore here isn't just a biography of a dictator. It's a terrifying blueprint of how contempt, ignorance, and sheer indifference can be weaponized.
Section 1. The Seeds of Resentment, a Shattered Dream in Vienna. To really wrap our heads around the catastrophic scale of the Holocaust, we have to start at the micro level, long before any of those fiery, massive speeches. Picture this. At 18 years old, Adolf Hitler arrives in Vienna. And at this point, he isn't thinking about world wars or conquering empires. He literally just has a suitcase full of canvases and brushes. His singular, somewhat harmless ambition was to be accepted into the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. But he was rejected. Over and over again. He was flat out told he lacked the talent. And with those rejections, the very first embers of a deep, bitter resentment were lit. Now consider the stark contrast of his daily environment. You have a humiliated Hitler, bouncing around homeless shelters, selling hand-painted postcards just to survive. And completely surrounding him is this thriving, incredibly diverse Jewish community that held a really strong presence in the arts, science, and banking. Instead of doing the hard work of accepting his own lack of talent, his personal frustrations desperately sought out a scapegoat. And unfortunately, he found one right in front of him.
But here's the thing. Vienna didn't automatically make him a murderer. It educated him. He sat in cafes absorbing pervasive conspiracy theories, and he read these pseudoscientific pamphlets preaching Aryan superiority. Most crucially, he watched the city's mayor, Karl Lueger, use aggressive anti-Semitic rhetoric as a highly effective political strategy. Hitler took notes. He realized that organized hatred could be a powerful tool to move the masses. Blaming a minority? Well, he saw firsthand that it generated applause, votes, and ultimate power.
Section 2. The Myth of Betrayal. The catalyst of World War I.
When World War I broke out in 1914, a pretty directionless Hitler suddenly found purpose by volunteering for the German army. He fought, he was wounded, and for the first time he really felt he belonged to a cause greater than himself. But then, the sudden armistice of 1918 hit. And you have to wonder, how does a country surrender when its soldiers are still physically holding the front lines? For Hitler and countless other soldiers, this military defeat simply didn't make logical sense. The sheer physical shock and psychological trauma of surrendering like that demanded an explanation. And that explanation came in the form of a devastating lie. It's known as the stab-in-the-back myth. This was a completely baseless conspiracy theory, claiming that Germany wasn't actually defeated on the battlefield, but rather betrayed from within by internal enemies, specifically pointing the finger at Jews and communists. This is the exact critical moment where a massive national tragedy, losing a war, was weaponized into a nationalistic cause against a clear, entirely fabricated enemy. And the myth? It landed on incredibly fertile ground. The brutal 1919 Treaty of Versailles hit Germany with massive economic reparations, significant loss of territory, and deep public humiliation. This created a desperate, heavily traumatized nation that was starving for simple explanations. The economic and psychological devastation of Versailles was the perfect amplifier. Hitler's personal, twisted hatred was now perfectly primed to resonate with millions of people.
Section 3. Institutionalizing hatred. The rise to power.
So as we move into the 1920s, we watch this frustrated former soldier completely transform into a hypnotic political order. Germany was in chaos. Hyperinflation was literally turning banknotes into worthless paper. Families were burning cash just to keep warm. Bread lines stretched for blocks. In this starving, desperate Weimar Republic, the masses became incredibly susceptible to anyone at all, offering an external target to blame, paired with grand, sweeping promises of national greatness. Hitler managed to capture the soul and the intense fears of Germany by turning his fanaticism into this spectacular visual machine. He had outlined his horrific plans in his 1925 book, Mein Kampf, but he knew books weren't enough. He used striking symbols, torchlit marches, and booming mass anthems to give a starving people a brand new identity.
When the Great Depression hit in 1929, he leveraged that mass unemployment perfectly. Eventually, he was appointed chancellor in 1933. At that point, hatred was no longer just angry rhetoric. It had officially stepped into power. The very moment he had the power of the state behind him, hatred literally became the law in a chilling, highly systematic escalation. Step 1. Dehumanize through widespread propaganda, constantly utilizing parasite rhetoric. Step 2. Prohibitions. This meant banning Jews from public office and forcing them to wear the Star of David on their clothing. Step 3. Physical exclusion, forcing people from their homes into overcrowded, walled-off ghettos, which inevitably laid the groundwork for Step 4. The bureaucratic, horrifying euphemism they called the final solution: total systematic extermination.
Section 4. The machinery of death. Industrialized extermination.
By 1942, in occupied Poland, 6 main complexes were fully operational: Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, Chelmno, and Majdanek. Now, it is absolutely crucial to understand that these were not mere prisons or standard labor camps. They were specifically designed, highly engineered factories of death. This entire system was engineered by educated doctors, engineers, and bureaucrats. Think about the cold efficiency of it. In Phase 1, packed trains arrive and human beings are immediately sorted into fit versus unfit. In Phase 2, the elderly, young children, and pregnant women are sent directly to gas chambers. And in Phase 3, those deemed fit are condemned to brutal 14-hour days of forced labor. They were starved and beaten until their bodies just gave out, and then they were discarded in crematoriums. And the ultimate cruel lie of this massive industrial machine was hung right over the gates of Auschwitz for everyone to see. Work sets you free. There was no freedom. None. This remains the most terrifying demonstration in human history of how far a supposedly modern, civilized society can plunge when ethics completely disappear into an industrial machine. Section 5. The living memory. The aftermath and warning. Now, the end of the Third Reich did not mean immediate relief. When Allied forces finally liberated the camps, they found piles of corpses and skeletal survivors who practically defied imagination. And for these survivors, they faced a completely fractured humanity. Entire communities, entire family lines, and homes had just been annihilated. There were also these massive invisible cultural wounds, the silencing of the vibrant Yiddish language, profound theological crises, and literally hundreds of thousands of refugees sitting in camps, desperately searching for a homeland while borders around the world remained closed to them. The world tried its best to pick up the pieces. Following that 1945 liberation, the Nuremberg trials attempted to rigorously document these staggering crimes and deliver at least a form of justice, establishing vital legal precedents for human rights. And later, in 1948, the creation of the State of Israel finally provided a place for many of those survivors to try and begin again. But, while the world moved forward, the millions of victims could never be brought back. Which brings us to exactly why this matters to us today. The Holocaust didn't happen in secret. It just didn't. It was executed in plain sight, with official decrees, massive paperwork, and perfectly organized officials. The hard truth is that hatred needs the silence of the majority to become a catastrophic reality. It was the active complicity of thousands and the quiet indifference of millions that actually built those camps. Never again. We repeat this phrase in museums, in documentaries, and in political speeches all around the world. But I strongly urge you to see this not just as a historical motto that we memorize, but as an urgent, living, and sometimes uncomfortable commitment. Remembering is a duty. It's our duty to recognize the warning signs of disinformation, fanaticism, and the normalization of hatred in our own modern time. So I want to leave you with this final, truly provocative thought. Today, when hatred finds a new disguise, or when intolerance raises its voice in our own communities, are we part of the silence, or are we part of the memory? Thank you so much for learning with me today on this explainer. Let's make sure history remains a lesson and not a loop.